It's 8:20 on West Bremer Radio. We've got Harold the H. Cock-a-doodle-doo. And he's going to tell us a story. This is a great story.
Yes.
Back in the day, you young people, you didn't turn a switch on the wall to get light. You used to use a kerosene lantern.
Yes.
Or lamp.
A lamp.
This is back in the 1870s.
Yes.
There were people killed by exploding kerosene lamps.
Of course there was.
They're sitting at the breakfast table, boof, and poof, gone.
And that was the end of breakfast.
Let's talk to him.
All right.
No, Harold.
Oh, yeah, I know.
How are you, H?
Fantastic, Danny. I'm not having a kerosene lamp right now, but they were tough back in the day. Their explosions, they just got on with it. But today, geez, it'd be up.
Well, mate, just a quick example. I had a grandmother apparently had 15 children, and she lost 4. I didn't go to counselling. She's backed up for another one. They're different people, weren't they?
Different people, different time, and I'm talking about the 1870s, which, totally different mindset. They were just tough. They got on with life and did the best they could.
One of them drowned under the Indooroopilly Bridge. It used to be blue water, and the sand was fairly sort of grainy like Margate's.
There was a swimming hole there. Yeah, there was a beach and swimming hole there.
How do you know this stuff ahead of what I know? Let's talk about this story. Let's get into the exploding kero lamps with Harold the H. Peacock.
Yeah, that's right. And it all began because of Ignacy Łukasiewicz. Now, he was a Polish pharmacist and engineer responsible for the first modern street lamp in Europe and actually the world's first oil well, modern oil well. His inventions that actually came to the family home were kerosene and the modern kerosene lamp, which he invented in 1853. Now, his designs were so successful that in the 1860s, kerosene lamps began being imported into Australia by the thousands. But almost immediately, the explosions began, and Ipswich had its casualties from Ignacy's early designs. Wow. You see, in 1867, the caretaker of Queen's Park, his name was William Aylett, he narrowly escaped death, and his house was almost burnt down following the explosion of his kerosene lamp on the kitchen table. Now, his life had already been threatened when he and his family were harassed and chased by a large number of Aboriginals who were camped in Queen's Park at the time. And Aylett went on to become in charge of the gardens at Goodna Asylum and Ipswich Girls Grammar School. But it wasn't a kerosene lamp that got him, nor was it the Aboriginals, but rather it was diarrhea, because that's what killed him in the end. Now, in 1872... but in 1872, the first person killed in Ipswich by an exploding lamp was Catherine Joy. Now, Catherine's husband was a fruiterer on Brisbane Street. Late one Saturday night, she was helping her husband shut up the shutters when the kerosene lamp over her head exploded with the sound of a gunshot. A blaze of burning kerosene poured on her head and covered her body, and within seconds, poor Catherine didn't stand a chance. The second death in Ipswich from kerosene lamps came in 1875. That's when John O'Doherty was the proprietor of the Carrier's Arms Hotel in Brisbane Street. He was turning down the lamp over the bar when it was knocked and exploded. The burning kerosene covered his head, neck, shoulders, and down his stomach. The poor man was quickly a mass of flames, and he too never stood a chance.
Wow.
And worse still, within weeks of the tragedy, John's wife Esther lost her only means of support when she had to give up the licence to the Carrier's Arms Hotel. And she also endured the death of a 5-year-old son who had been named after her late husband. But the worst lamp disaster that ever happened in the Ipswich district was on Christmas Day, 1876.
Wow.
That's when there was yet another explosion, this time at Walloon. Now, it was a mother, Catherine Schwartz. She was filling a family's kerosene lamp. She unscrewed the burner and held the blazing wick that was alight to one side while she poured in the kerosene from a half-pint tin on the other. A slight draft ignited the kerosene, and there was an almighty explosion. The tin was blown to bits, and the burning kerosene was horribly covered Catherine and her children who were standing around. 2 of them, aged 7 and 9, died under awful circumstances, and a third child was at first not expected to live, and Catherine herself, for some time, was also gravely ill. Now, the good news is Catherine and her third child survived. And apart from a few strange things happening in her life, like, I don't know, her younger son dying of typhoid, her husband's horse being skewered through the chest and killed by a shaft in an oncoming cart near the Walloon Hotel, and her husband himself dropping dead in their garden at Walloon while talking to her brother, well, Catherine actually enjoyed a long and satisfactory life. She lived a further 43 years after the disaster, and she passed away in 1919. Now, the designs of the kerosene lamps eventually improved and the explosions stopped. But it was a faulty product scenario, Danny, that it was never officially addressed by authorities, and people just got on with life, despite some awful deaths in Ipswich and elsewhere.
Got on with life.
It just wouldn't be allowed to happen today, would it?
No, of course not. It's just, we're so precious, aren't we?
Oh, well, obviously precious with life, but, sometimes life just throws things at you. And here, children killed, but they got on with life and did the best they could with the cards they were dealt.
Can I tell you quickly?
But it was really unfortunate circumstances.
There was a bloke, Paul Tully came to me. I rang him up. This is years ago, and I was at 4BC with Wayne P. Roberts, and he sent me out. There was a bloke living up the back. You went up the hill at Goodna there, and there was big property. There was a lot more scrub in that there then, and there was this old Queenslander, and the old bloke who's 86 lived there all his life. And he used to shower, a bath in a little tiny tin thing. It was everything from the 1890s. Everything. He had lanterns. He never had any electricity.
Nice.
He had no hot or cold running water. And Paul organised the place to be put lights in it, and hot and cold. But he was living like that. This is back in the early 2000s. He was living like that back then, with Kero lamps.
But you know what? He was probably happy.
Happy as a pig in
Absolutely.
Blendo. Happy as Larry is a bit of a character. His brother and him lived there all their lives. Are born there, and that's not there now. They knocked it down and built houses. But yeah, it's great.
Good on him. I love those old fellas. I've never met them, but I love them.
And you know what? It was today, the 6th of April. Waltzing Matilda was performed for the first time in 1895, was sung at the North Gregory Hotel at Winton, and the author Banjo Patterson, who set the words to a traditional Scottish tune, Waltzing Matilda. Now, how do we get a copy of this particular story? And I think you also appear on 4WK, don't you?
Oh, yeah, look, the people across the Darling Downs, the Granite Belt, I've got stories, local stories, history stories for them. But this one, Danny, for you, Ipswich and West Bremer Radio, it's all on historyouthere.com. And you can even see, if you search, you can find pictures when I was out at the North Gregory Hotel listening to recitations of Banjo Patterson's poems. So there's all sorts of history, but absolutely a lot of history stories about Ipswich and the 4WK for the Darling Downs and Granite Belt.
Waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. As he sang, as he watched, and had a piddle on behind the bush, you'll come a... Anyhow...
Thank you. I was waiting to boil my
Harold,
billy.
You're a great storyteller.
That's a different version than I know. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you, Harold.
All right, Harold, we'll talk to you about this time next week here on West Bremer Radio. It's 8:29, 25 seconds.